There's nothing wrong with you. There has never been anything wrong with you. There's nothing to fix. There's nothing to change. And no matter what you've gone through, there's really nothing to heal. And this might sound very counterintuitive, actually quite strange, coming from someone who has spent the last 30 years of her life helping people, counseling people, to not just identify problems, but how to address them. If there is a problem, our only problem is that we have been deeply conditioned. And there's no one to blame. Everyone has gone through layer upon layer upon layer of conditioning. There's not a human being walking the planet that hasn't had to deal with conditioning, or they may not even be aware of it. But it starts with family programming, it starts with community programming, it's happening with our schools and the education process, it's happening in the religious process if you were brought up in a certain religion or have been following a specific spiritual path. Societal conditioning is very intense, and what we're experiencing now with technology and all the information that's coming in and inundating us with socializing and social media and all kinds of programming, the conditioning is just becoming more and more deepened. So why is this so important? Because until we're aware of the conditioning, it runs our lives. Just check out your life. You don't have to believe what I'm saying. Look at your life. And if you really look at it gently, but very clearly, we use clear seeing in this process, but it's always, always gentle. Look at your life, and you could start looking at the decisions that you've been making over and over again. Long-term decisions like the profession that you're in or the job that you've been working at, that's all being driven by conditioning. And sometimes I know people who are getting to the end of their lives and they had worked at the same career, they've been the same career all their, for many, many decades of their lives, and they realize like, oh my God, that isn't even really what was in my heart to do. I did it because I thought that's what I should do, and that came about when I was quite young. And so sometimes when we're looking at some of the decisions that we've made, and we look back at how long we've been making those decisions that aren't even in alignment with our true self, it can be painful. And that's okay. It's all right to look back and understand that that was conditioning. So again, there's no one to blame, but the conditioning is so strong that it not only drives your decisions with the work that you may be doing or have done, it drives the decisions you're making in relationship, the partners that you choose, your lifestyle, where you decide to live, the decisions you're making throughout the day. You know, we think we're going through our day feeling pretty free, like we have free will, we're making the choices that we want to make. But if there's conditioning running the show, then we're really not free, and we're not living a truly liberated life, because the conditioning, whether you're conscious of it or not, is making the decisions for you. This is why it's so hard to break a habit. It's so hard to just stop and say, you know, I really don't want to be doing this anymore. I really don't want to respond this way anymore, but the conditioning has been so deep. So what we want to do, we want to look at it with clear seeing. We want to be vigilant about the mind. This is how we gain mastery, self-mastery over the mind. We're meant to run the mind, not the mind run us. We're meant to be in charge of decision making and where we're going to put our focus on, even what we're paying attention to in the mind, not the other way around. So it's kind of like being a detective. It's becoming very aware of what you're thinking, very aware of the thoughts that are coming through, this mind stream that's coming through day in and day out. It's happening 24/7, it seems like, right? Even in our nighttime dreams, there's thinking going on. There's perception going on. So we want to become really clear of the thoughts that we've been thinking, of the perceptions that we've been having, of the judgments that we're carrying. All this goes back to conditioning. So it's really safe to say that any conditioning that you have that has taken hold of you Any conditioning that you've adopted, bad or so-called good, has nothing to do with who you really are. So we don't have to spend a lot of time analyzing the conditioning, where it came from, understanding what it's doing to us. We just need to become aware of the conditioning that has been happening. And again, we're doing this very gently. We know what comes to mind is Dzogchen. If you're not familiar with the practice of Dzogchen, well, it's spelled Dzogchen. Dzogchen is the practice of openness and presence, right? Openness and presence. So when we're looking at the conditioning, and if you're not in touch with any of the conditioning, just take a look at not just your actions, but look at the reactions. Actions and reactions. This is conditioning. If you're someone who has had a hard time managing anger, for example, you want to look at the conditioning behind it. You want to be very, very clear that you recognize you are not that anger. You're not that pain. You're not that anxiety. You're not any of that. That's, again, I'm bringing this up today in this beautiful, I'm in the jungle on the island, this beautiful environment, and here comes, I'm hearing a plane's going to be coming overhead, although I can't see it. You want to become very aware of what's going on inside of your mind, but not identify with it. It's just conditioning, and so we don't have to go back into a blame game of where I got it from and how much it's caused problems in my life. We just want to put the light of awareness right on the conditioning and hold it up to the light and see it for the shadow that it is, because the conditioning has created layers and layers and layers of shadow blocking the true self. The conditioning creates layers and layers and layers of tension in the body. When we're operating from the conditioned self, and sometimes we hear it called the separate self or the false self or the ego, I'm using the term conditioned self. We're talking about waking up from the tyranny of the conditioned self, because it is like a prison. When we're operating from the conditioned self, then we are out of alignment with the true self that we are. Dzogchen, when it's translated, means true perfection or great perfection. And we think, well, my gosh, how could I feel that perfection that I am? How could I possibly begin to understand that that's what I am when I've been operating like this, or behaving like that, or reacting in this way, or making these decisions that aren't in alignment with my heart, or or I feel this sadness, or I'm depressed. We really lose sight of the perfection that we are by the layers and layers of conditioning. And then again, those layers create tension in the body. That tension in the body, you'll feel anxiety from it. It causes restlessness, and enough building up of anxiety turns into depression. So again, this is why it's so important to want to become aware. I'm not asking you to change anything or fix anything, because it might sound like you're saying, well, now you're wanting us to fix conditioning. No, no, no. It will dissolve all by itself as you look at it clearly with non-judgment. This is really important. Dzogchen is about openness and presence, and that openness means you're creating the space for yourself to look clearly at something without judgment. All right? This is really important. This is not a path about adding any more layers of judgment, because the thing is, underneath all of the conditioning, every choice you've made, every behavior that you've acted out, every response, reaction that you've had, has been an attempt to experience the true state, the true condition, your true nature. And that is pure, unconditional love. But the more conditioning, the more distortion in our thinking, in our perceptions, and in our behavior. And that's what we're seeing in our world and on the planet. The more conditioned somebody is behaving from that place, we're not really a conditioned self, but the more that we're identified with that conditioning, the less loving at times our behavior is. Even when we're trying to be loving, if it's coming from a conditioned place of, say, obligation, that's not love. That's not love. Doing something that you want to do because it's really in your heart to call that person, connect with that person, do something for somebody else, that's love. But out of obligation, that's conditioning, right? That's conditioning. So I'm combining looking at the conditioned self with the understanding that beyond all that conditioning is Dzogchen. It's your pure essential nature. It's that true perfection that you are. It's just the conditioning has created all these veils in front of our true self. So as you look at the conditioning gently, without any judgment, it will begin to lose its grip on you. Without that, it is like a tyrant in the mind. The mind's like a raging, chaotic tyrant at times, making you feel like you're not perfect the way you are. I don't even like the word perfect, but you're not completely loving the way you are. It's always this tyrant is saying you have to do more and you have to do it this way and you can do better and you should be reaching for this or maybe you shouldn't have done that. I mean, the conditioning is really the only problem. But again, we're not trying to fix it and we're not trying to get rid of it. That just takes you into another chase, another form of running after something. No, we stand still and we clearly look at some of the decisions we make throughout the day. Just start real gently. Just real gently. What's the decisions that you're making today? Starting with the morning, what you're going to drink, if you have coffee or tea, or what you're going to eat, and then what you're going to do. Just notice the conditioning. We're just really becoming highly astute observers. That's the practice. That is Dzogchen, of being really open and really present to what's coming up. All right? So as you look at the conditioning and you notice how it's been running your life, you could set yourself free, not by changing anything, not by trying to improve anything, but becoming really, really aware of what's going on within the mind. Because that conditioning has led to every perception and every judgment and every preference and all of those things that we hold so near and dear to ourselves that create that sense of separate self. Just try this. What would you be? Who would you be without all the conditioning? If you were to strip away all of the conditioning, if you were to return back to that state of awareness, just the pure awareness that you had when you were first born, what does that feel like? When you were born and you were a baby, you were just completely aware of everything. There was no sense of separation. You didn't even know you had a body. Nothing was separate from you. You were one with everything until somebody taught you, and no one to blame here. This stuff has been going on forever in the human condition. But you were taught that you had a body. You were given a name. You were told this is your family, and here's our family history, and this is where we live, and this is how we function, and this is what's important, and this is what you need to believe. And societal conditioning kept deepening and deepening those grooves, right? And in the community, and and if you were brought up in a certain religion, this stuff has been taught to us since the beginning. The conditioning is very, very deep. But if you didn't have any of that conditioning, if you were really willing to look at it for what it is and ask, do I even believe this? This belief that I have about whatever it could be, is this really true? And chances are, it's not. It just goes back to conditioning. So, practice Dzogchen, the art of openness and presence, and just gently take a look at what's been going on with your belief system and all the conditioning that has followed, and set yourself free. Namaste.